Yeah, and I think it's quite common for many of us to inherit a legacy set of services. And I think uh, more important to recognize is that you inherit a legacy set of decisions and a legacy set of assumptions that underpin why you have those services. So, one of the first things to start with when you inherit something like that is to understand what is the problem these products, these services, whatever it may be, what is the problem they are trying to solve now or they were trying to solve. And then look at where they are offering value and where they are meeting user needs and where they're not. And then underneath that, like what value are they bringing and are they efficient and secure and safe? And if you allow yourself time to do that period of inquiry, what you'll probably uncover is a number of assumptions that have been baked into how things are working and what people need and want and what influence your legacy set of services or products are having on people's behavior. And from that, you can then create the case for change if change is needed. So be really brave when you come in, and if someone says, "Oh, you've got all this, but I really want you to change it up," be brave to say, "Actually, some of this is okay, and it's not the priority right now." And also be brave to say, "We don't need to necessarily replace some of this. We should sometimes just stop some of the things we're doing." And then you can focus in through that sort of journey on what your priority is for where you invest money and also your people's time and energy on what to do next. So, for example, we haven't just created new services. I was presented with a problem, which was there was an existing skills test. And this skills test assessed the competency of wannabe teachers in their English and maths skills. And if they passed that test, they could go on and become a teacher. And these were delivered face to face. They were quite clunky if you compare it to other graduate routes into professions, that you had to go off into these test centres, which were sometimes hidden away in industrial estates. And we saw a lot of people drop out of deciding to become a teacher because of the barrier they presented. Now, the sort of working hypothesis I was gifted was, well, let's just look at how we can transform that. Maybe we move it online. So let's go back to what the actual problem is we're trying to solve. We're trying to ensure the standards that teachers have when they enter the classroom in English and maths. And what we discovered through looking at this was the skills tests simply weren't trusted. They certainly weren't giving us that level of assurance. And there were much better ways of gaining that assurance and also offering additional support where people had gaps, which was through the wider teacher training practice. So what we were able to do was, rather than go and jump straight to replacing a legacy approach with a new solution, was say, well, hold on. Actually, what we think we should do is we should stop these tests altogether. And that would be much better. We'd still gain our assurance if we deliver it in a new way through the universities and schools training teachers, but also we can save all of this money and remove a deterrent effect that's stopping some really great people becoming teachers. So I think that would be what I'd say is go in, have a period of inquiry, interrogate the assumptions, love your problem, focus it all around the problem. And after you've worked out what the best approach is to dealing with that problem, then you can look at what the transition plan is. And that will be a very important part of it, what the transition plan is away from those legacy services, such that you can do that safely. In working with people in different parts of your organization or different parts of your end-to-end service, you'll come across people who have lots of different skills and techniques, different ways of working. And it's always about bringing people together and finding common ground and alignment. I would strongly advise against creating a owner or commissioner and a deliverer model, where someone sort of asks for something and someone delivers, because that creates some tension where you're not learning iteratively together about what's happening on the ground, but instead having someone whose role is to really be the expert of what that policy ambition is, what maybe the legal framework is you sit within, or wider stakeholder handling, and that being part of a delivery team, such that as the delivery team brings new insights, or as you as a policymaker have new insights, you bring that into the same discussions. And so everyone can evolve at the same speed rather than having to do lots and lots of back and forth to sort of share what you're doing and have like challenge sessions. I think it's very important to have that one team mentality in this. So I'd start by saying, how do you work together? Let's get really clear on what is the shared purpose and shared vision of what we're trying to do, and really drive out where there's some underlying expectations or underlying assumptions. What I find really helpful by having the service line mapping artifacts is a very visual representation of what services people interact with, when and how those interlink throughout the journey. And what I find, that's a lot of very detailed information that's being boiled down into something that's very simple. And when something's very simple to see and understand and reflect on continuously, is you come back to the point we were talking about earlier, which is it's easier to create a shared understanding of what's happening. And that shared understanding, and crucially shared language, if you're all talking about the same names of the same things people are trying to do, means that you can bridge that language gap quicker, you can make decisions quicker, you can move forward more quickly. But it's probably been really, really respectful of different ways of working, and trying to value everyone's different expertise, and then bringing everyone together around a common problem and setting up a common way of working that feels like it takes the best of everything. So it's a really good question. I mean, I think my first reflection on the journey we've been on is, I don't think we've ever called it, or we've certainly not been the main label, a transformation journey. So this hasn't been a centrally led initiative to bring about change, which has been done to people. And I think that's been one of its key successes. We've implemented it over a 3 to 4 year window now, and that has meant that it has allowed us to do it as the priorities have grown and evolved. But I should add, in terms of what the challenges are, it's easy for me to sit and reflect on that. I'm not sure I knew that was what was going to happen when I first arrived on day one. When I first arrived on day one, it felt quite daunting to look at the huge problem space with a huge set of ambitions without really knowing the path of how we were going to get there. And while you can map out a rough set of priorities and you can go and make sure everyone's agreed they are the priorities, they do constantly change. So you're constantly having to test yourself: are you doing the right things? And with that comes, the question of have I really made the right decision? And there's never a perfect or right answer here. So I often say sometimes a decision is better than no decision, because you're able to move forward and learn. And as you learn, you say, okay, well, that approach didn't quite work. I'm sorry, everyone. Let's try another way. And I think you have to be quite humble and quite ready to say that hasn't worked and let's try something else. It's easy to say that on reflection. While you're going through learning that something hasn't worked, it can feel quite hard. But that is we talk about feedback loops from what's happening with our users, feedback loops from how our stakeholders are feeling, how our teams are feeling, how we're feeling, and being truly reflective is probably the best way to bring about that change. And I'm the first one to hold up my hands and say, I sometimes want to move faster than the organization around me can. And some of that is good, and some of it is tricky. So some of it is good, is that you're constantly testing whether you can go faster, and where you can grab those wins. But you do come up against the points where you can't, and you just have to be ready to acknowledge that and take a slightly longer term approach. So I definitely say that. One of the other things I'd say about this transformation journey we've been on is just truly the journey we've gone on to bring policy and delivery skills closer together. I think it's very easy to think, okay, we're going to create some services or some digital products, and for that to be led out of a truly digital organization, which is relatively either protected or your arms are around it. But actually, I think what's been a real success, but was born out of that feedback loop and that learning, was that we started more and more so to bring policy inside those service teams, or have them very closely aligned, like I talked about, so things could iterate together. But that didn't happen overnight. It was been very much through learning as we went along. but also previous learning. So I have worked in organizations which have kept it separate, and I found it deeply frustrating and slowing. And actually recognizing that most of the best things, most of our innovations are born out of a constraint or born out of a problem, will probably make you feel quite comfortable when you go through a transformation journey, to realize that actually when things haven't worked, then that's normally the most valuable thing, because what you put in place as a result of that is what will be your sort of magic sauce that will power you forward.